Welcome to You Don't Know Jack Films, the podcast, where I sit down with individuals who inspire me, hopefully diving deep into their journeys and uncovering stories that aren't often told. I'm your host, George Jac. Today, I have the honor of speaking with someone who has been a significant part of my own journey. Aaron David Roberts is not only the president and founder of Rising Tides Creative, but also a visionary in the film industry and a dear friend. Cool. We're finally here. The inaugural podcast for You Don't Know Jack Films. And of course, I'd have no other than filmmaker and fellow friend, Aaron David Roberts. So if you guys don't know Aaron David Roberts, he's also a filmmaker based out of San Diego. We connected a little bit less than a decade ago, right?
Sounds about right. Yeah.
It was when you were rebranding Blue Vision Entertainment.
Yep. It was like end of 2019, I think. Yeah.
So it was just before the pandemic.
Yes, sir.
Yep, I remember. So we met up. We talked about rebranding to, what is it now?
Rising Tides Creative.
Rising Tides Creative.
Yes, sir.
Yep. So Rising Tides Creative also was kind of like the spawn of another big project that you're involved with, which is called
The Chula Vista Entertainment Complex, or CVEC,
Yep.
as we've been calling it around here. So.
And I recall in our first conversation, we were trying to talk about Rising Tides Creative. We actually brought up a studio complex in San Diego, didn't we?
Yes, we did. And you were saying you had worked on one before, and I had an idea for one, and I kind of mind melded them together, and that was definitely the building blocks, the start of what eventually became CVEC, for sure, man.
Yeah, it was cool, man, because like I said, we're both native San Diegans,
Yep.
so I think one of the things that really like resonated with me was that you wanted to help turn San Diego into like a film industry, a thriving film industry, like what it once was.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, 'cause we were both here, I think we had both known about Stu Siegel and the studio that was in San Diego before, and all the work that we had for a while here, and I think we kind of both felt that if we could build the infrastructure again, we could really bring filming back into town for sure.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, that's the one thing that I think we really gravitated towards was not only like making a film industry in San Diego, but also being able to promote future filmmakers and amateurs and students to give them an actual place to learn the specifics and get the experience of being a filmmaker. Because as you know, film school doesn't really teach you much, right?
Yeah.
And then they don't have like job placement services
Correct.
or anything like that. So in order for us to build a sustainable economy for the film industry, part of that would be the refresh rate of the employees and people working in the studio complex.
Yeah, man. No, I've been talking about it a lot to different government groups and people we've been talking to about how important it is for us to have that base layer of folks coming up in the industry that we can train, because if we're going to start with like 3 studios, if we're going to end up being able to expand to 10 studios on our lot, and if we're working on, 2 features, 3 series, some other live events, we need to have the crew base, right, to be able to handle that volume of production. And, currently we have a solid crew base in San Diego, but if we were to film what I've been saying, if we were to film 3 feature films in San Diego at the same time that were all like major, 50 to 100 people crew, we might struggle to fully crew that up with all San Diego people who are at least experienced enough to do that. So part of our job over the next couple of years is definitely going to be to get that crew base, not only folks who are already working in the industry and making sure that they're set up and ready to go, but also that next generation like you're talking about.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't really know, that aren't involved in the film industry, why it's so important to have like a studio complex. And it's because of the turnkey solutions, right?
Yeah.
So San Diego, there's big films that come out here, studio films that will come out and shoot on location stuff, but purely that. So pretty much they got their own crews, they've got their own cast, and they're just coming down and shooting exterior location stuff. Whereas when you have a studio complex, a turnkey system to where you could have the entire production there, because you could build sound stages, or in the case of CVEC, it's going to be virtual production stages, because that saves people money. We could get into those details later when we start talking about numbers, but that's the main reason why I wanted to impress upon the audience the importance of a studio complex.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're hoping to be between our 2 phases, the idea is that you can come in, do your pre-production and pre-viz in our, space at phase 1. You can obviously cast it up, crew it up, do all your production at the virtual facility phase 2, and then come back over to, you know, Hollywood ready mixing rooms and edit bays, right? And do all the post-production back at the office in phase 1. So the idea is we're keeping not only all of that money locally into the economy, right? And local in the Chula Vista in San Diego, but it also is, like you said, you know, a turnkey solution to be able to take something from pre-production, even from development, like we want to start developing and having development services, you know, from development through post-production release. And, you know, ideally we will even be able to start helping out with distribution. So
That's awesome, man. So we'll get into the details a little bit later about CVEC and some other stuff that we could talk about, but let's talk about with the audience, like where you came from as a filmmaker and like how you became interested in this journey that we're both on now.
Yeah, man. Well, I have a lifelong background in film and TV. So my dad has been in the industry since he was 19. So it's sort of multi-generational, you know. My dad ran a successful commercial production company in San Diego from like the mid 90s through the mid 2000s. So I've grown up on set since I was, you know, 8, 9, 10 years old, right?
Yeah.
Like learning the lingo, you know, grab an apple box. Okay, what does that mean? You know, get a C-47, go run a stinger, like learning all this stuff at a young age and being, you know, becoming versed in film terms and how a set works. And, you know, my dad was always the producer on set. So seeing him manage, you know, 20, 30, 40 people on a big commercial shoot or something like that, it was cool. And it really gave me you know, a holistic view of like, oh, well, how does a commercial actually get made? How does, you know, and being able to kind of extrapolate, okay, so a film set is probably similar to this, but a lot bigger, right? If you're doing a big studio movie.
Right.
So I was always interested in film and television, you know, anytime in high school where you could like do a video project instead of write an essay, you know, I was getting my group together and like, all right, let's make a film about this, or let's do a little short or something, right? And it wasn't really until I got out of high school that I, you know, kind of decided like, hey, I think this is going to be more than a hobby, you know, like it was kind of that way through, you know, you'd make short films with your friends in junior high. And like I said, in high school, I didn't really know if that was exactly the direction I wanted to go, like with my career. And honestly, my parents kind of tried to dissuade me, I think, early on, because they know the struggle, right? And that's the thing. But once I made the decision, like, hey, this is what I want to do, you know, my dad did start connecting me to like, all right, well, you got to start at the bottom, right? You got to start PAing, you got to start, you know, assistant camera. Eventually you can maybe learn how to grip, right? You got to start doing all this stuff at the bottom to start working your way up on film sets and just to have a better understanding of how they work. But yeah, you know, started doing my own productions at about 19 years old, and, you know, 11 years later, here we are.
So how has that journey been from like taking that full commitment 11 years ago to now? I'm sure it's been a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah, man, it's been a lot. You know, what I always tell younger people who, you know, every once in a while someone's like wants to buy me a coffee and, you know, pick my brain or whatever, right? And I always say that like, if this is really what you want to do, it's going to be one of the hardest things you've ever done. Like full stop. Like make no mistakes about that. Have no, you know, reservations about that. Like if you're not ready to commit yourself fully into knowing this is going to be one of the hardest things you've ever done in your life, maybe keep it as a hobby, right? Maybe, you know, you can still make short films. You can do 48-hour festivals, but like, if you really want to get to being a full-time director, videographer, cinematographer, it's going to take a lot of work. Like that's like, I think the biggest thing. And, you know, I think early on in my career, I had a little bit of the blind ambition, which I do think is helpful a little bit, where you're just like, you know, I made my first TV pilot at 21 and I was like, oh yeah, we'll just sell this thing. We'll be making TV shows. It'll be easy. Like, yeah, this is how you do it. Right. You know, and then you kind of get your butt kicked a little bit, you know, and sort of learn more of the realities of the industry. And I think for me, I had a mentor probably 6 or 7 years ago who, you know, told me, Aaron, Hollywood film and TV is a multi-billion-dollar business. They don't just let anybody walk through the door.
Right.
Which, and that like kind of reset it in my head of like, oh yeah, this is like an institution. And like any institution that's been around a long time in this country, it can be hard to break in, you know? And I think that my journey through my early 20s and my mid 20s was, one, just learning more how everything worked. Because I was more of an idea person. I was a writer. I was a director. I really, like when I started, I didn't know really cameras and lenses and lighting. And I didn't know anything. I relied on a great group of people who knew that stuff. Micah Miner, Peter Mickelson, Brandon Worley, but I myself like did not know almost any of that. And it took me in my, starting when I started actually Rising Tides Creative really is when I think both of us around the same time started to actually learn more of the nitty gritty, like, okay, but how does all this actually work? What is the theory behind camera placement and lens and lighting and stuff like that, right? Like I definitely wasn't as well versed in that until the last 5 or 6 years. And I think that was like kind of the last evolution, so to speak, of me growing, at least as a filmmaker, was finally learning, how this stuff gets made, right? Like more than just having an idea and expecting other people to execute it,
Right.
was actually learning the kind of the skill set and the theory behind it all myself.
That's very interesting that you say that because we're on the You Don't Know Jack Films podcast, and I didn't know jack about that. Shit, I didn't know that. Like
You were an actor when I met you, man, pretty much.
Well, yeah,
Like, that
and
was,
so we were kind of on the
yeah.
same journey. Like
Yeah.
I was an actor. I thought, hey, I'm just going to become an actor. I always wanted to become a director, but I
Yeah.
was like, hey, I'll be an actor first. I don't need to learn any of the technical
Yeah.
shit. And then I'll become a famous actor. And then I'll parlay that into
Right.
becoming a director,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not how it works. And then the pandemic really taught me a hard lesson. And that's when it was like, I mean, I was taking Google IT courses online because I was thinking about getting out of the business because
What are you gonna do?
everything got stripped
Yeah.
from us, right?
Yeah.
So I was thinking, what am I going to do? But I spent, 6, 7 years before that being an actor. And I was the type of actor on set like you were as a PA or a crew person, just trying to figure out the lingo and
Yeah.
try to figure out the machinations of how a set worked. So then I could be a better actor, right?
Yeah,
but
yeah,
that
yeah.
ended up being something that turned into a skill that producers are good at because
Yep.
you got to understand what everybody's doing at a base level in order to be able to effectively communicate and lead a set, right? So back to my point about being surprised about you being kind of on the same journey. It's just interesting that we were on that same journey and I didn't even know that.
Yeah, man. It was I think the biggest thing is like, again, around the pandemic, Andrew Barrick and we started doing that documentary. It's now called Stage Left. It's gone through a few iterations about kind of the music industry's struggle through COVID and like independent venues and independent bands. And that's where it was like back to, all right, there's like no budget, or it's self-funded from Andrew and I at the start. And Andrew was also on the similar journey of mine of like, all right, we just got to like learn this now. And like, that was the first set where the first day of production for that. And it was almost exactly 4 years ago. It was March of 2021. And I've been getting like my Facebook memories that are showing me like our first setups. And that was really the first time where it was me on set with, 2 cameras and a lighting package and going like, all right, it's kind of up to me how, like, all right, let's see, like, has enough of that knowledge sunk in from being on set? And like, okay, all right, I know we got to get the key. So, I think we were running like actually like Kino flow tubes at that point still. Like, I didn't think we had much LED. It was like, all right, we got to get a key and, fill and, let's make sure the shadows aren't too. So like, it was just a learning process. And our setups from there, like our screenshots from our day one setups to what Andrew and I are doing now, like we've literally seen our growth from not only like framing, but lighting and kind of, camera placement, of our where's our B camera going to be and like what angle are we going for? So that project really just was kind of trial by fire, right? And like really taught me a lot because I had to. It was the necessity of like, well, if you want to do this documentary, it's first of all, it's COVID, so we can't have really big crews, and we don't have money to pay more than like pretty much just our expenses to get somewhere. So we just had to figure it out. And like, again, I think that has in the end made me such a stronger director. Like we've been saying, the more that no matter what position you want to be in this industry, whether it's an actor or a producer, writer, director, knowing how everything works is so imperative, I think, to furthering your skill set in this industry, like hands
100%.
down. Like I think I am a better director now because now when I visualize a shot, I also know how to better communicate that to a director of photography or to my gaffer, right? Because I actually know, I have a better lingo and a better understanding of like how 14 millimeter lens is going to make a scene look versus a 50 versus an 85, right? And like actually having that base set of knowledge is definitely a lot more than just, before I was what people called me like an actor's director. Like I was really good at like, hey, I've got this script. I can talk with my actors about like, hey, here's how I think it should be said, or like, let's come up with some, banter here, or, some improv here. But it really, again, took me the last couple of years, I think, to have the much fuller scope of what a director and a filmmaker should really have skill set wise.
For sure. And I think that also goes to speak for post-production as well, because now I'm speaking for myself, but I'm sure you're the same. Now I go out because I understand post-production. I'm shooting to edit, so to speak. So before I would go out and just try to capture as many shots and as much coverage as possible. But now that I'm in post-production and I do a lot of editing, I know what I'm looking for, because the final scene is obviously, it's going to be the motion picture, right? Yep. So it's a string of pictures. That's what motion picture industry is. So understanding that in the end, which they sometimes call the editors the final director, you'll be more efficient on set as a director or cinematographer if you're involved in the shot lists.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's been said that you make a movie or a production, you make it 3 times. You make it in post-production, you make it in pre-production first, right? When you're writing or you're visualizing, like, hey, this is the idea. Then when you get on set, all of a sudden you have all these different practical realities of the spaces and exactly as big as you thought it was, or we actually can't put a light there, so we need to, flip the world or whatever, like we need to do something different. And so you end up making something a little differently in production than you visualized in pre-production. But you're right, then when you're going into post-production, that's really where the magic is. And that was one of the earlier skill sets I learned, and I built my first business, Blue Vision Entertainment, on a lot of post-production, actually, on just editing for other people who had already shot stuff and just kind of being like a post-production house. And I think that the more I've done post, it definitely influences and affects me as a director in a positive way, right? Because you are able to know like, hey, I don't need that, because I know what it's going to be in the edit. Or I do need that because I know that that's essential for the edit, right? So, yeah, definitely.
Cool, man. So what about leading into your journey to start CVEC? How did that all transpire?
Yeah, I mean...
because it just seemed to come out of nowhere, really.
Yeah, it was... I mean, I've had an idea, similar since I started my first company. So Blue Vision Entertainment started when I was 19 years old, and we had a small studio space in Escondido above a dance studio that basically they had the dance studio owned both floors of this space, but they had this whole upper floor that they just didn't do anything with because it was like an old building. It was a little dilapidated. So they're like, you can use that space and do whatever kind of you want with it. And the idea behind Blue Vision Entertainment was, again, very similar to what anybody's heard me talking about CVEC with, was like, all right, well, I was 19 and I knew friends who were photographers and filmmakers and actors and, like website people and musicians. And it was like, well, how can we all sort of work together in a way that benefits all of us, right? It was kind of this idea of like, I was grasping at the strings. I didn't still know that much about the industry, but I had the idea of like, I feel like if we all start kind of working together and, my friends who are musicians need videographers and my friends who are videographers need something to shoot, right? Like, and kind of trying to build that coalition. It didn't really turn out to, exactly what I anticipated. Blue Vision Entertainment really, again, just became more of just a regular production company, and some of the rest of that fell away. But the idea in my head, even when, again, it kind of morphed and changed, I always felt like there was credence to that idea of like, hey, let's build a really big artistic tent. Honestly, the idea then sort of just sat in my head until we connected in 2021, right? And it was sort of like, all right, how can we build the next step? And honestly, right before we connected, I went through, what prompted me to rebrand Blue Vision Entertainment is I had this $100,000 TV pilot that I had like mortgaged my life on. Basically, I went over $30,000 in debt with, loans and credit cards, and maxed everything out for this big TV pilot. Oh yeah, we've all done it, right? And I got into this film festival. It was kind of like the premier film festival for television only, specific, like independent television stuff. And I thought like, all right, that's it. Like, this will be the moment that like changes my career path. I'm going to go out to this festival. This festival was sponsored by HBO the first year, and like Abrams, which is now A3 agency. And I was like, great, I'm going to meet agents and execs, and like there's meetings that are going to be set up for us. This will be it. This will change my trajectory. Finally, I've been working to get here. And on the last day of the festival, I wasn't really expecting to win awards, but like the networking was almost non-existent. It didn't go as planned. None of my meetings were really that great. And I was sitting there on the last day of the festival, honestly having like a crisis of identity of like, what am I doing? Like, should I, kind of similar to what you were saying in COVID, like, should I even be in this industry anymore? Should I be like gearing myself for something else? Like I was, an electrician for a little bit when I was younger, like as like a trade thing. Like, should I like get back into that? Should I do something else? But what kind of hit me was like, all right, you have to start thinking further in advance. You can't be so centered on like the here and the now and like this TV pilot wasn't successful. What do I do? You need to start thinking 5-10 years. How can you future-proof yourself and your brand to have success? And that's kind of where the idea of like, well, what if we rebrand? What if we start teaching the next generation how we should do stuff? What if I can be a part of a group that identifies that next Steven Spielberg in high school and actually nurtures them and gives them opportunities? That can be a safeguard to the brand that I build. And then it's not just on my success, it's on the success of a whole bunch of other folks that I can look to and going, you know what? I was successful in this industry. And again, that was pretty much the premise behind why I wanted the rebrand. And then I met with you and it was like, oh, you're also thinking similarly about a studio, and you had been involved in sort of a project to try to get one off the ground a few years before. And I know we started talking a lot about education classes, and we had all these grand ideas heading right into 2020 of like, we're going to do summer camps and weekend intensives and all this stuff that requires in-person, communication. Right. And then obviously COVID hits us and changes the entire world and industry, and none of this stuff comes to fruition. I know my long-winded story here, but then basically I got the opportunity, a mentor and friend of mine met the mayor of Chula Vista at a small business meeting out in Eastlake. He posted it on Instagram. Sean Walchef, shout out, because you're always going to post stuff like that on Instagram. But good thing you did, because I was able to see that, oh, all right, Sean just met the mayor of Chula Vista. I immediately, replied to that story, said, hey man, if there's any way you can get me in touch with the mayor of Chula Vista, I have a project I want to pitch to him. Because I had known that Chula Vista was a big thinking city in San Diego. They had made a bid on Netflix's studio, and I think we're like a top 3 or 5 finalists for the project that ended up going to New Mexico. Mm-hmm. They had made a similar bid on Amazon studio, which had ended up going to New Jersey. Mm-hmm. So I knew that while San Diego as a whole has generally been thought of as a city that thinks small, and we lost the Chargers, right? Like we haven't done big infrastructure plays as like the city of San Diego,
right?
But I knew that Chula Vista, I thought, was a city that could think big. Yeah. And so as soon as I, saw that, Sean got me in touch with the mayor. I think about a month later, I was in the mayor's office, summer of 2023, pitching the project for what we called at that point the Chula Vista Entertainment Complex, because we decided like, hey, let's brand it with Chula Vista. Let's put Chula Vista on the map. The mayor was a big supporter from day one, and then pretty much spent all of last year working with the city of Chula Vista, kind of carving out what the agreement and partnership would look like. That was voted on by the city council in December of 2024, unanimously approved, and kicked off the last almost 3 months of the craziest, busiest time of my entire life. So,
it's a pretty crazy undertaking.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
That's for sure.
Well, let's hear a little bit more about the Chula Vista Entertainment Complex. So I know there's 2 phases, right? The first phase is the top 2 floors of that building that's already made.
Correct.
Then the second phase is going to be a lot that they have currently, but we're going to build sound stages on that.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
First one's 85 million, second one's 245 mil or something like
no,
that?
so it's actually 85 million in total for both phases.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So
okay.
like phase 1 is, we're going to be taking over those top 2 floors of the Millennia Library building.
Right.
It's a beautiful, beautiful new space that the city of Chula Vista built be the first new public library in Chula Vista in over 30 years. Beautiful Class A building. We are so happy to be moving into it. So much like natural light and like natural air. There are these big bay doors that you can get like a cool cross breeze. Real creative, like real conducive to being creative, right?
Right.
So phase 1 is about $26 million to outfit both of those top 2 floors. And what we're really trying to do with the third floor is that's going to be the big community creative hub, right? So that's where we want to not only have the education classes and programs that we're talking about, but we're going to provide amenities to the creative community that might be a little out of their price range. Like if you're starting out or if you're running a small business, to invest in a 10 to 15 foot LED wall, that's expensive. But we want to do that for the community so then they can come and use facilities like that, right? To invest even in a podcast studio like you have, it takes time, it takes money. Not everybody can do that. So we want to build out a couple turnkey podcast studios. So if you're a podcaster or you have clients who do podcasts, you can continue to grow and build your business. Come right in. Do a turnkey studio. You can take the footage as soon as you're done. You can go and edit it on the edit bays that we'll have if you want. We're going to have some state-of-the-art computers because we know that that's another barrier, right? Like if you're working with 4K, 6K, 8K footage, it can bog down a laptop. It's processing power, graphics card, all these things that, again, like when you add up all these items, it can be tens of thousands of dollars. And to be able to lower that barrier to entry to somebody, like, hey, come in, use our nice cameras, use our nice studio. You can edit it in our own suites as well. So you have the ability to not have to spend twice the time because you're working on less nice equipment, right? And it makes everything more efficient. So we really want to turn that space. We're calling it a creative co-work or creative incubator right now. And we want to turn that space into being this great community space where people can grow their businesses, grow their brands, they can learn new skills, and they can network with all the other creatives that are coming through that space as well to build stronger relationships as they continue to grow their own brands, right? So that's honestly the stuff that excites me a lot. Like everybody, the media, everybody talks about bringing Hollywood and film and TV and all this other stuff, and that's obviously important. That's where we're going to make the most money as a business, right? That's where our economic impact numbers come from. But like we started this conversation with, the true security and safeguard of our business long term is going to come from building that community, building those education programs. That's what's going to be important. Phase 2, we're going to purchase, it's literally right across the street, an 8.5 acre lot from the city of Chula Vista. And the first thing we're doing is building a 90,000 square foot virtual production soundstage. So out of that 90,000 square feet, there'll be about 3 or 4 different size studios within that footprint. But what is most exciting to us is on that same lot, we have room to build about 2 more buildings. So within about 5 to 7 years, we could end up with 10 sound stages in Chula Vista, just in that area.
That's crazy.
And then the thing that excites me even more is Chula Vista has 380 plus acres that are undeveloped land. It's a mile behind or less than a mile behind where our studio is. And that's where we really hope in 7 to 10 years.
Backlot?
Oh, yeah. Ooh. By 20, 30, 40 acres. And now we're really competitive on like a Hollywood size standard, right? Like now we are not only have 10 studios that, some of them, they might not all be virtual. Some of them might be more traditional to build sets onto. And then we have these big backlot pieces. We have, Baja Studios recently closed down. We can build a big wave pool, big pool area again, right? Something like that's needed. We can build, we've been talking about building a mock about like half a mile to a mile stretch of fake freeway that then can be controlled, and you don't have to. Yeah, that's what a lot of people get really excited. I mean, I've had producers tell me that.
Do they have that somewhere?
I think I don't honestly remember. If you are listening to this and you're the person who gave me the idea, please let me know. I don't remember where I first heard the idea from, but I believe it probably exists somewhere. If it doesn't,
it makes sense.
I guess I'm giving this idea to whoever might execute it before me.
Yeah.
But it does make a lot of sense, right? Where like if you can then have a controlled freeway, and if we can figure out a way to rig where you can put the background in to be whatever you need it to be, whether that's with traditional green screen or being able to build panels with it. Like think of all the time and money it costs to shut down a freeway, especially in California.
Yeah.
That is no easy feat. And then you still have to, rig your lights up on the freeway because it's like in the same time that you have the freeway shut down, versus if we have kind of a turnkey solution for a freeway that's already pre-lit, pre-rigged, ready to go, like that would be game changing, right? And so like we're trying to think of building a backlot, not only with your kind of standard backlot stuff like a main street and like, maybe a little cul-de-sac or something like that, but also with things that will set us apart from places that, from backlots that exist, and being able to have these cool pieces, like, again, like a freeway stretch that like anybody's going to want to use and will keep business coming into Chula Vista.
What about some kind of like hybrid virtual production stage backlot? Like maybe
Yeah.
some LED screens
Just built
placed
all
throughout.
around. I think that's makes sense, like where we
Right?
should go,
Yeah.
because like I think the virtual production technology is so strong with what it can do, that, and it's only going to get better.
Right.
That I think integrating is, especially again, if we're not building this backlot for 5 to 10 years, I mean, who knows how much better the tech might be then. And
sure.
I know they just started rolling out like LED flooring. That like, so not only do you build it in like a 270-degree wall, you don't build on top, but there's now like these LED flooring panels that are starting to come out.
Crazy.
I've heard the technology on the flooring stuff isn't exactly ready yet, but again, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I'm sure there'll be so many awesome solutions that we can barely begin to think of. And we definitely want to stay up on the best and newest technology.
Right. And to your point earlier about future-proofing the company, one thing that I want to touch on for our listeners who don't know is what exactly a virtual production stage is. So if people are familiar with the show Mandalorian on Disney, that's probably the most used example of what a virtual production stage is. But essentially, in real life, somebody would go to like the sand dunes in Saudi Arabia to shoot in the sand dunes for the film's location. Whereas in a virtual production stage or virtual production soundstage facility, they have LED walls within the confines of the studio, and that LED wall transforms into the background of that sand dune for that example.
Correct.
And it's connected with a device on the camera, so when the camera moves, so too does that perspective of the background, which is crazy. And then, me, I'm obsessed with lighting. The most important part, I think, is the fact that it actually casts the light from the sound or from the virtual production wall, so you don't have to really necessarily light it up as much as you would with like a green screen or blue screen.
Yeah, it's definitely a different set of lighting and camera techniques, and the technology is obviously like a real big piece of it, more so than just setting up a camera and filming in front of a green screen or filming on location, right? And then what's also like the really important piece is building that practical set in front of the wall. So like, again, when you're talking sand dunes, you can lay out 10 feet of sand, so then you have like a nice practical foreground, and that's what they do so well on The Mandalorian, where you're looking at The Mandalorian and you're like, I can't tell, like, did they really go somewhere? Like, I know they didn't, but I can't find the line. I can't see where the foreground breaks with the background, right? And that was definitely the first show that put this on the map for all of Hollywood. Everybody looked at The Mandalorian and went, that's a TV show budget, and it looked like a feature film.
Yeah.
And that was because they utilized virtual production in that way for the first time, and that definitely kicked off, I think, kind of the boom and the upward trend that we have in the industry right now towards virtual production.
I think it's an important point to make that people should start, if you don't already know it and you're trying to be a filmmaker, you should start researching what that is, because it's not going away and you're going to eventually have to use that. So
and there's a lack of skilled talent who know how to do this stuff right now. And that's honestly when we've been talking to these other virtual production providers and kind of choosing our integration partner for CVEC, a lot of them are saying like, like you could end up finding a niche part of your business as just being a training ground where other companies are sending their people to you, because there just aren't enough people who know how to do this at a really high level yet.
Right.
And that's also in part because film schools haven't caught up, right? And that's somewhat because this is expensive technology, right? It's not necessarily cheap. So it has been hard to have, these legacy film schools that already have invested so much into green screens and backlots and practical sets to actually get with the times. I think it's finally starting now, like within the last 2 or 3 years. I've heard like ASU and USC are trying to get into more of that. But there is like, I agree completely. Like if you can find your way onto a virtual set or find stuff on YouTube or whatever, the more that you can learn that knowledge, you're setting yourself up to be in a really good spot, because there is kind of a need for workers who know how to use the hardware, the software, the robotic camera arms, all these kind of different pieces that go into a virtual production set.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people out there are probably gonna be like, oh no, AI could take that job, so I don't want to find a job that is eventually going to be replaced, but somebody's got to like oversee that whole process. So get used to that, like
Yeah,
figure
yeah.
out how it works.
Correct.
But speaking of AI, what do you think
Uh-oh.
about that?
This comes up a lot.
Yeah, it does.
I have
Yeah.
some real strong opinions on AI. Funny enough, actually, just yesterday, I was meeting with a guy who's an animator, and he was written on a bunch of animated shows. We were talking out in public at a coffee shop about this, and I was saying that, first of all, I'm not somebody who has my head in the sand about AI. I'm not. I use AI, right? Like I use ChatGPT to help with business writing, email writing, research. Always make sure to ask ChatGPT to check their sources and provide sources, because if you don't, that's how you get the hallucination effect where ChatGPT suddenly creates things that aren't real. But it's a tool, right? Like anything that we have with technology, I think AI is a tool, and I think there are ways to use it responsibly. I think there are ways that we can integrate it that are really important for pre-visualization, for storyboarding, even for pitching, right? Even to create maybe like a 2-minute pitch reel or a 30-second pitch reel of something. I'm not against it in full, but I also believe that there's always going to be a market, at least while our generation, all the generations ahead of us, even to some extent Gen Z, I don't know what 20, 30, 40 years from now is necessarily going to look like when kids have maybe grown up with this just being ubiquitous and a part of their life. But for at least as long as I feel that I'll be alive, I think there's always going to be a market for real stories told by real people. And I think that I want to set up CVEC as a place that's always going to be known as something where our scripts aren't coming from AI. We're not using AI actors or AI this. Like, we want to try to still do it using technology where we can. Will we maybe use AI help in Unreal Engine to come up with backgrounds for the LED walls? Yeah, it seems kind of silly for us not to maybe. But we still want to have a human touch behind that. We still want to have a human artist who's programming in Unreal and utilizing AI in the way that they think is necessary. Mm-hmm. But I'm not worried about an AI studio coming along and just being like, well, we pumped out 100 films that were written with 100 scripts from ChatGPT, and we just programmed that into Google's Gen 2 video, and we made 100 movies. All right, like there will probably be an AI studio that's successful. Some people will watch that.
Yeah.
I'm not the target audience for that. I personally don't care to invest my time into watching something that was basically a programmed amalgamation of ChatGPT. These programs are just trained on all the other writing that's ever been existed. I mean, everything's derivative, right. Sure.
Yeah.
Like, even when we're writing things naturally, it's derivative of, I'm influenced by Kevin Smith. I'm influenced by, John Hughes. So my writing and my stuff is going to be a derivation of that. But it's also, there's got a true human touch to it, right? It also has a piece of my intrinsic personality, my point of view, my life experiences. So by and large, I think there's always going to be a market for real, authentic storytelling that is still made with real people on a set with actual cameras pointing at us, right?
For sure.
And I think AI is just going to be a tool that we continue to use, we continue to develop. Like I said, 100 years from now, when maybe you just can't tell the difference between AI and real life, and I don't know where humanity will go. I hope that humanity always keeps arts as like an intrinsic piece to who we are, because we've been painting on cave walls, right? Like, right. I mean, it's always been a piece of human expression. And I think it can be a little concerning for sure, but by and large, I'm not concerned about, the people who shout on social media like, well, why am I even going to be a filmmaker? Because there's going to be no filmmakers in 5 years. Like, I just don't believe that's going to be the case.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, to your point, that's why you need to future-proof your own self and your own set of skills, right? Definitely. So I use it for all kinds of things. Now, I would disagree with you in saying that I do use it for like script writing. I wouldn't say writing the scripts, sure. but brainstorming pitching with ideas, it, pitching it ideas, and then developing ideas. And when you get to a point where you're going back and forth with it over hundreds of messages, it gets to a point where it really is the essence of yourself.
I agree.
You've just kind of used an expert to brainstorm with at a phenomenal pace.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what I use it for. I wouldn't use it just to like spit out a script and then shoot it, because then, it's not really your own.
Yeah. And I think it's great to gut check things too, Like I'll upload stuff. I'll I'll have it help with log lines and other, again, like technical writing of the creative process as well. I do think it's helpful, and I definitely, you know, time is also a commodity, right? Time is money. It's an old saying, but it's an old saying because it has truth into it, right? And I know that. I feel like with how busy my last couple months is, I've learned that even more than I knew before. And so the fact that, ChatGPT or other, you know, AI models like that can be an amazing time saver to accomplish what used to take me hours to come up with a marketing plan for a client. I can now spit out some real quick bullet points of like, hey, here's what I want in the marketing plan. Now write it for me, right? Now do the more technical, formal writing for me.
Right.
And then I'm obviously going to review it. I'm going to make sure it's correct. I'm going to make some changes in verbiage and maybe like, you know, synonyms. And I'm like, well, you don't need to sound like, you know, ChatGPT always wants to add some real flowery language and, you know, wants to really sound really smart. Sometimes I'm like, oh, let's just, you know, be a little more casual. But again, like it is such a great time-saving tool that 1,000%, like you have to use what's available or you will fall behind of someone else who's using that tool to do twice the work that you are, you know, again, sitting with your head in the sand, not using. So
it's way more than twice the work. That's for sure.
4 times the work. I don't even know.
It's crazy. It's exponential how quick like you could get shit done.
Yeah.
Everything. So man, like what do you want people to know about CVEC? I don't want to take too much of your time. So we know a lot about CVEC, about your journey, where you came from, how we're trying to inspire the next generation of filmmakers. Obviously, like you want to inspire filmmakers or artists with your own art, but I think it's more powerful with CVEC and this idea of cultivating an industry from the ground up. You know, and I think it's important to inspire people face to face, just as opposed to being online and inspiring people like that.
We've been doing monthly community meetups around the county since January. So we had our first one in Chula Vista in January. In February, we did like Central San Diego around like Marana Boulevard. And then we just had one this last Sunday in Escondido. And across those 3 meetups, we've met well over 400 creatives in the community. And everybody is so excited about what we're doing. And I feed off that. I feed off how everybody has left these networking and kind of events saying like, oh, I met so many cool creatives here today. Like, thank you for just providing this place and opportunity for us to get together and meet. Like, that is so important. And it's obviously the first step of trying to grow what we want to do here, right? And I think that San Diego as a whole has so many talented creatives and so much talent in the artistic community. But there's just been generally, at least I can say over the, 10, 12 years that I've been trying to do it here, I think there's been generally a lack of leadership overall. Some of that does come from our actual government, like the counties, the cities. We don't have a film commission. We don't have really a film office. There's one person who handles like all of permitting, and he also does a bunch of other stuff within, the city of San Diego, right?
Shout out to Guy.
Shout out to Guy. Yeah, was just on a call with him earlier today. I think that the leadership from a civic perspective has been lacking. That's something that we're trying to hop on to, like pushing our leaders in that direction. Chula Vista does seem to be leading the way, but there are some other state assembly member people who are, from San Diego County who are also trying to help us. Shout out to Assemblyman David Alvarez. He's been a real big proponent of fighting for some of the legislation that we're looking for at the state level. But I also think that just bringing the artistic community together in San Diego in a much bigger way than I think has ever been done before. And I'm not trying to step on other groups and other organizations that have done it in maybe smaller pockets.
Yeah.
I want to bring all those people together. Like, great, I know there's San Diego Media Pros and there's Film Consortium and there's all these other, nonprofit groups, Vanguard Culture, and I think that everybody's done a good job at kind of building a little niche of hey, here's kind of who's in my circle, here's who's in my circle. And I think it's time that we combine all these circles together, right?
Yeah.
And we really build a really big tent. I think that's going to be the best way that we as a county can move forward and really put ourselves on the map. I think combining that community with the infrastructure that we're building, and, it's still about 2 years roughly until our infrastructure is built, especially when we're talking about the sound stages, that we've got 2 years to build this really strong community, effective education programs, and then watch it all pay off when we have, our cutting our red ribbon and getting going, right? And I know just today it was announced, there was a press release that the California state tax credit approved 51 new films, and supposedly, from what I read, 31 of those films are going to be shot outside of Los Angeles. And they named San Diego County as a place some of these films are going to be. There's no specific, I don't know, are they studio? I don't know budgets. I don't know whether just filming one day in San Diego or not, but it does show that California as a whole is trying to bring film back to the state. And it shows that studios and other productions are starting to look outside of Los Angeles to these other areas of California. And I think if we can just be ready as a town, as a county, as a community, there's going to be a lot of opportunities coming our way. Not just opportunities that we at CVEC are going to create, but just other opportunities as we do all these film incentives at local, county, and state levels that should really revitalize and bring an industry back to San Diego.
So what are some action items that our audience members can take to actually take action and make this happen?
Yeah. So I think, one, we've been asking everybody who is interested in supporting CVEC. We've been kind of coining this throwback idea. It was kind of heavy in the late 80s and early 90s, mainly around music, but of street teams. Right? The idea of a street team was if you were in a punk band or a metal band, you had a dedicated group of core believers who would go post up flyers for your next show, who would sell your album out of the back of their trunk or whatever,
grassroots.
Right? Like grassroots, pure, like that's how movements are built, right? They're built locally. They're built from the bottom up, not from the top down. So we've been telling everyone at our meetups, like, hey, the first biggest thing you can do is if this is something you want to see, just start talking about it, about it in person, talking about it to your creative friends, sharing our posts online. I see the share numbers when I made our last video talking about, hey, we've got this next meetup coming up in Escondido. It's shared 80, 90, 100 times. And those aren't coming from me. Those are coming from just people who are seeing it and are being a part of that street team.
Because they're excited about this, right?
Which is really cool. Yeah. I mean, man, the studio page for CVEC on Instagram is about to overtake my own personal Instagram in terms of followers, and it's only been around about 3 months.
Wow.
Which shows that, one, good, like our content does seem to be hitting, and two, people are connecting with the general idea, right? And they're sharing it, and they're getting us that organic growth, which is so important. And so one is like, again, if you want to be just a part of the street team, just like make the project known to all of your creative friends, right? Two is, as we start doing these incentives, right? So for those who don't know, film production incentives are how all these other film markets have grown and blown up over the last 10 to 15 years. Atlanta, Georgia, New Mexico, New Jersey, Kentucky, Oklahoma, Minnesota, there's about a handful, 10 to 15 states or municipalities that have invested in the idea that if you come and film your project in our state or in our region, there's a set aside pot of money or a tax credit from the government that says, hey, we're going to give you a rebate, sometimes between 20, 30, even up to like 35 or 40% if you film your project here.
Right.
And
with certain stipulations.
Exactly.
Like 80% cast and crew.
Correct. And all these different programs vary a little bit individually of what you need to do to qualify. But the idea is, especially with how filmmaking has become harder to get things financed and budgets have kind of shrunk and, things don't do as well at the movie theater anymore, that these incentives have become crucial to producers and to studios for going like, well, I could shoot in LA or I could shoot in Georgia and get like 25% more money back before I've even sold my picture, right? So we need to do that in our cities in San Diego County. So we're already working with Chula Vista on establishing a pilot program. We've talked about trying to get the same similar legislation program in San Diego, the city. We need to then do it at a county level. And then third, obviously, the state, Governor Newsom recently announced he wants to more than double our $325 million state program to a $750 million program. And we're working on, again, carving out like an indie film program piece of that, which would be money set aside just for projects that are $250,000 up to $10 million. So not everything is so competitive against the major studios, right? Mm-hmm. And when all these things come up for votes and for, people needing to show their support, we need San Diegans, we need these creatives who, if you want to see this industry come back, there'll be a point where from the CVEC page we're saying, hey, write your local state senator, send them an email, give them a phone call, or show up in person at this meeting that we're having at a town, a city council meeting or a town hall meeting, and voice your support, because we're going to need our representatives to actually approve this stuff, right? The way our government works. And for them to do that, they're going to want to know that the support is there.
Right.
So besides just being a part of a street team and sharing about what we're trying to do, there's going to come a time where we actually are going to need action from our creative community to get things passed that's going to actually build a long-term sustainable film economy.
Right.
In San Diego County. So those are the two biggest things. Come out to our meetups and stuff like that. You can always figure out more ways to get involved. DM our page at Chula Vista EC. I'm happy to always kind of talk to anyone and everyone. I've held a lot of meetings, one-on-ones over Zoom, over phone call with creatives around the county. Sometimes we go grab coffee. We have a list that my communications coordinator put together. I think over the last couple of months, I've met with almost 300 people. It's been crazy.
Interesting.
And obviously some of them I'm meeting with groups of people or whatever, but we have met a lot of people, and partly that's because my job is to talk to anyone and everyone and see what works and hear that community voice and figure out how we can build this in a way that's actually going to work. So our ears are open. We want to hear from the community. We want to hear from folks.
So where can we get your contact information, and what are the links for your social media so people who want to be proactive can go over there and figure out how they can take action?
Yeah, so I'm personally at always AROB, AROB, on Instagram. You can find me that way on Facebook. I probably have a TikTok that I don't use under that name. Chula Vista Entertainment Complex is at Chula Vista EC. On Instagram. We're most active on Instagram right now. We are going to make a Facebook page and make a Facebook group. There have been a lot of people asking us to have a group and something where our community members can start to go. Not only can we post updates, but people can network digitally, because we've been setting up this infrastructure of physical meetings and meetups.
Okay.
So just honestly, the best way is to just DM our Chula Vista EC page. If you want to get in contact, we'll provide you with the email contacts and kind of go through all the next steps from there. We're pretty active at making sure we get back to those folks who reach out to us over Instagram.
Well, what about our baby boomer generations out there who prefer email or snail mail? You got an email address
you can
that they
always
can email?
info@chulavistaec.com, and we will hook you up depending upon, again, if you've got a question on the technology side, we've got people on our team who are doing that. If you've got questions or you're looking to be an investor on the investment side, I got folks to do that. Or if you just want to talk to me about an idea or something, a way we can better kind of future-proof this, we'll make sure you get connected with the right person on the team.
Awesome, man. Well, it was great chatting with you.
Yes, sir.
And I want to leave the audience with something they don't know jack about, of course.
Ooh, okay.
So what would you say is something that most people don't know about either yourself, the film industry, or a studio complex? Like a common misconception.
Wow.
That you want to correct right here and right now.
Oh boy, put me on the spot. I think the biggest misconception about, I'll go with the industry or kind of filmmaking in general, is that I guess I don't want to go back to saying that it's easy, but I think there's a lot of people who don't understand the business side of it. And I think that's the biggest piece. I kind of alluded to this when my mentor told me, hey, it's a multi-billion-dollar business. They don't let anyone in. And, I have all types of creatives who are like, oh, I've got a great idea for a script, or I've got this, I've got that, I've got this project. It's like, all right, but what do you know about casting and pre-sales and distribution and again, tax incentives? Where are you planning on filming this? Are there production incentives that we can use? Grants, do you want to partner with a nonprofit? There's a lot of different ways that you can try to get something financed in film. And I think until you understand the business side of the industry and that there's a really advanced and whole ecosystem of business decisions that actually have to happen before anything creative gets made, that I think is a lot of people from the outside look at Hollywood and they just see creativity and movies and scripts and actors, and they don't necessarily understand that a lot of projects can take 4, 5, 6, 7 years to get made, and their creators have to continually kick down doors, run through walls, just to get something financed, just to get something made. And I think that if you're out there and you want to do this, learning as much as you can about the business side of the industry, I think is really something that people should know about. And they might not know jack about it, but they should learn about the business side of our industry.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you having you on my podcast.
Of course,
the very
man.
first
Thanks
one.
for having me.
And I guess I'm kind of upset that you didn't see that.
That does look like Rising Tide. So I was going to say something before we started.
Yeah.
It's like, I want one. So first of all, I'm kind of jealous. Like, oh, wow, that's like the perfect, Rising Tide.
That leads me into the thing
go.
that I'm going to be doing on this podcast, and that's giving my guest a free item, which is...
Oh, no way. Really?
Yeah, which is, yeah.
Oh, shoot. Well,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah, dude.
I absolutely love that.
Yeah, man. Thanks for being my first
That's
guest on
gonna
the podcast.
Go right in the office. Can't wait till we're hanging that in the CVEC office.
Or bring it back
Looking
here for more
over.
podcasts.
That too. I could do that too.
Cool,
Yeah,
man.
Yeah.
Well, it was
Awesome.
good seeing you,
Appreciate
dude.
you, brother.
We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
All right, bye.